I think people at home are thinking, how could that not have crossed your mind? Or you wouldn't have felt just a little bit in your gut, like, maybe this isn't a good idea to go and sit on the board of this Ukrainian company.
I said to you, in retrospect, I wish that my judgment.
Right, but at the time, you never thought, this might not look right.
You know what? I'm a human. And you know what? Did I make a mistake? Well, maybe in the grand scheme of things, yeah. But did I make a mistake based upon some unethical lapse? Absolutely not.
That's Hunter Biden surfacing for the first time since the Ukraine scandal came to light. Here's more from his interview with GMA this morning.
If your last name wasn't Biden, do you think you would have been asked to be on the board of Burisma?
I don't know. Probably not. I don't think that there's a lot of things that would have happened in my life that if my last name wasn't Biden.
Now, the younger Biden has been in the news because for weeks President Trump and his supporters have been slamming and sliming both Joe and Hunter Biden, accusing Hunter of committing crimes for his work in Ukraine and China. Bear in mind, there is absolutely zero evidence of wrongdoing. And today, Hunter got a chance to answer for himself. And you got to figure that in tonight's debate, Hunter and Ukraine sure to be a topic among Democrats. In part two of Rich's interview with Ed Rendell, the former DNC chair and governor of Pennsylvania, they discussed that and more.
Today, I saw Hunter Biden, and I expected something different than I heard. I thought he'd come out guns a-blazing, saying on how basically through conspiracy theories without evidence, both he and his family was smeared by the president. Instead, I got a mea culpa of sorts and acknowledgement that mistakes were made, even if it was under appearances nonetheless. Would you advise the Bidens, especially Joe Biden tonight on the debate stage, to point out the hypocrisies of the Trump family, et cetera, and go on offense instead of defense?
Well, I would, but I think it's important that Joe acknowledges that Joe should start by saying, look, this has been looked at by virtually every media outlet has investigated whether there was any illegality here. The Ukrainian prosecutor who was fired said in a statement last week that there was no illegality on either Hunter Biden's or Joe Biden's part. So I would start with that. But I would also acknowledge that probably, even though Hunter didn't do anything wrong and there was no influence peddling, it creates an appearance that some people could be skeptical about. And in retrospect, he wishes he had stopped Hunter and talked Hunter out of doing it. I think there's nothing wrong with that. It would make sense to the American people. But we've got to stay away from developing an equivalency. Donald Trump's accused of doing this to the Ukrainians, but so is Joe Biden. They're like apples and oranges. There's no equivalency here at all. There's no wrongdoing in any way, shape, or form on behalf of the Bidens. And Trump and the administration is replete with wrongdoings, things that are dangerous to the United States security.
Well, you know, there was that famous line that Michelle Obama coined, when they go low, we go high. It sounds good, but in today's day and age, is that the right tact for any Democrat, including Biden, to take? And by that I mean, it would sound crazy for me to say this a few years ago, but why not compare the Trump kids, compare the Turkish hotel that they worked out, compare what both Donnie Jr. and Ivanka and the rest are monetizing the office. Do you see that as a bad strategy, a losing one, where, as you say, you're creating false equivalency? Or do you say, no, I'm not going to take this. Let's put this out for the American public. If this is the fight you want, this is the fight you'll get.
No, I think that's okay to do, and may do it tonight, they may do it later. But again, what I'm saying is, I think, look, there is an appearance that the American people wouldn't like. A relative, a son of the vice president's over Ukraine dictating policy. The son's working for a well-connected Ukrainian gas company and earning a significant amount of money. That's probably a mistake in the terms of, even though the Bidens did nothing wrong and their relationship amounted to nothing, even though they're absolutely blameless in that respect, they created an impression which feeds into the general feeling people have about Washington. I think Joe should acknowledge that, but be very strong in saying there is no equivalency here. And yes, if he wants to go after Trump, I think Democrats would like it that he went after Trump. But remember one thing, Richard. Trump has not hurt Biden with this. Now, people say maybe as it plays out, but maybe. But the Fox poll that was published on Sunday had Biden up by 10 points over Elizabeth Warren, by 15 points up over Bernie Sanders. And Donald Trump couldn't have done Joe Biden more of a favor if he had taken out a billboard in the 100 biggest cities in America saying, alert, Joe Biden is the Democrat I fear most running against. This attack on Biden has made it clear to Democratic voters that Trump fears Biden. And that's worth a lot at the polls. If you look at the internal polls of Democratic voters, they're all saying beating Donald Trump is the most important thing in selecting a candidate.
You've probably seen the same reports I've had and talked to some of the same folks that Michael Bloomberg apparently is saying there may be some blood in the water here. If Biden struggles in the early states, he'd get in. Again, into the same common thinking that no matter what, mission one is the guy can't get 4 more years. To that end, how well does Biden have to do, not just in the debate stage tonight, but more importantly in the first few states?
Well, the first few states don't line up as very favorably for him. Iowa is a caucus state, and the Iowa Democrats tend to be very progressive. It's not a good battleground for Joe. Of course, New Hampshire, Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders are next-door neighbors to New Hampshire, and they've been on New Hampshire TV a ton. So those 2 opening primaries are not good battlegrounds for Joe. Joe has to wait till we get into South Carolina and then Super Tuesday. But the good thing about the Biden campaign, the vice president is so well known, he's so generally well liked by Democratic voters, and he's going to have the resources necessary to get to Super Tuesday and to compete in all those states. If he fails in Iowa and New Hampshire and doesn't do well, hold his own and then some on Super Tuesday, he could have real trouble with his candidacy. And then the moderate lane would be wide open. The only other strong moderate candidate is Amy Klobuchar. And although she does well in all the debates, it's funny, Richard, she can't seem to get traction or enough traction. And if that's the case, maybe Michael Bloomberg gets in and says, I'm going to take the moderate left of center lane and see if I can win some of the primaries that take place in April and May and June.
By every poll we look at, Warren has done very well for herself, and she's closed the gap. To that end, though, do you think she's gotten a pass on the Medicare for All and not having a really clear answer on that, and moreover, any of these social redistribution policies that, again, I think she's run a good campaign, but I haven't gotten clarity how she's going to pay for all this stuff. Do you think she gets pushed on that tonight?
Well, yes, because she's now having the good experience of being close to being a front runner, sharing it with Joe Biden. But the bad experience of front runner is in everybody's target sites, including the media itself and other candidates. Yeah, and she's got to do better. George Stephanopoulos actually was the one person who gave her a little bit of a hard time, deservedly so, when he said to her, look, please answer this question. Will your Medicare for All program that gets rid of private insurance, will it cause taxes to go up? And Elizabeth Warren said, costs will go down. Stephanopoulos asked again, costs will go down. She didn't answer the question, but he asked her a third time. He said, I'm going to give you one more chance to answer the question. In your plan, will taxes go up? Bernie, on the other hand, has been honest about it. He says, yes, taxes will go up, but because copays and premiums will go down, the overall cost to a taxpayer is not going to be an increase. They'll be actually saving money. I disagree with Bernie's financial analysis, but I will say Bernie's had the guts to admit that taxes would go up. Elizabeth looks somewhat disingenuous by ducking the question. It'll be interesting to see how she handles that tonight, how she handles the entire Medicare for All private, no more private insurance debate tonight. I am told that she's going to try to walk it back a little, but it's pretty darn tough to walk it back when you raised your hand in one of those debates and said you'd be for getting rid of private insurance.
Last question, Governor. Everyone's trying to figure out where the swing states, the electorate really is right now. In central Pennsylvania, does the guy who voted for Trump, who thought the factories are reopening and life was going to be that much better, does he feel hustled right now? Or is he bought in to say, you know what, Trump's right, it's all fake news, you know what, he's breaking some eggs here, but that's what we wanted when we elected him?
Yeah, and the fact that he's taking on China, that's something that most Americans have thought for a long time is necessary. Yeah, I think those voters, some of those voters have peeled off. Some have, there's no question. And you see in the polls on impeachment, some of those voters prior Trump voters are now starting to support the impeachment inquiry. But Trump is still going to be formidable in a state like Pennsylvania, especially if our candidates give him the opportunity to say, Democrats are running as socialist. They want to socialize health care. They want to socialize this. They want to socialize that. And Bernie and Elizabeth, and to some extent Kamala Harris, have a real problem with ending private insurance. That's an idea that Trump can hammer and hammer and hammer over and over again. And it's an idea that it's unacceptable to people who have private insurance and like it. And I'd say 2/3 of the Americans who have private insurance like their private insurance. They don't want to be forced into a government program. The industry is going to run those ads with delineating all of the horror stories from other countries that have had private insurance, leaving out all of the good stuff. And it's going to be very, very difficult for someone like that to get elected. I hear from my friends in Western Pennsylvania and from other elected officials that Joe Biden's the only one who can do well in Western and rural Pennsylvania. And I think that's true, which was the reason that Joe, I think, is the front runner, and I think will probably remain the front runner.
Ed Rendell, Governor, thank you so much. I really appreciate the time.
Thanks, Richard.
And up next, ABC News political director Rick Klein joins RFL to discuss tonight's Democratic debate, the politics surrounding the mess in Syria, and more.